right. I'd like to start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Kakodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Will There Be Sacrificing in the Kingdom? And the short answer to that is no. Now, I know brothers been saying that, that there's going to be a sacrifice in the kingdom for the nations, but that's not the case. In this lesson, Lord's will, Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai Ratazah, we can get into it. All right, now, let's start off with the word sacrifice itself. From the Etam Online, it says sacrifice, late 13th century, offering of something, especially a life, to a deity as an act of propitiation or homage. Now let's jump down here. It comes from the word from sakra, sacred rites, sacred, which what is sacred? The word sacred is to make holy. All right. And then also facere, to make. So the word sacrifice literally means to make holy. All right. And this was set up as the agreement that the Most High made with the nation of Israel. If we went off in any point, and broke any of the covenants or the commandments of the Lord, we would have to sacrifice the blood of an animal in order to receive forgiveness of that particular transgression. And that's what it means to sacrifice, to make sacred or to make holy, meaning to get back into the good graces of the Most High, because when we broke his laws, that would separate us from his good graces, and the only people that did that was the nation of Israel. Psalms 50 verse 5, gather my saints together unto me. And that's why we were called the saints, which the word saints means what? Holy. And we know that pursuant to Psalms, the 148th chapter, the only saints of the Most High are the Israelites. And Psalms 50 and 5 also mentions that, gather my saints together unto me, those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. Now we know that the nations never received the law, statutes, and commandments of the Lord. Now in the kingdom, they will be forced to keep them, of course. But what was the purpose of the sacrifice? The purpose of the sacrifice was to make a propitiation, right? To make an atonement between the Most High and the nation of Israel, so that the Lord can accept us back. Now the nations never received the laws. The nations never received the statutes. The nations never received these covenants. All right. And in order to sacrifice, you had to have what? You had to have a temple, which is why I showed you this. This is just a replica of the second temple, the one that Herod built up. But the point is that they had the tabernacle there. All right. And the tabernacle had two parts to it. The tabernacle had the first part, which was the holy, where all the priests would come in to minister unto the Lord. And then towards the back, you had, or wherever in the building, they had the holiest of holy. There would be a veil, and you would have to go through the veil. And the only one that could go through that veil was the high priest. All right, to make the sacrifices for the nation of Israel for that particular year, which was the Day of Atonement. So he was the only one that was able to go through that veil. And when Yahweh Shai was crucified on the cross, the veil rent. So the way to the holiest of holy is made now clear through Yahweh Shai, and it doesn't have to be done on earth like it was done in the past. And that's why the Apostle Paul, or what the Apostle Paul was breaking down to the Hebrews, about the sacrifice of Yahweh Shai, that they no longer had to sacrifice these animals, because Yahweh Shai's blood took care of that once for all of Israel. It says, then verily, the first covenant, which was what? When we read about the covenant that the Most High gave to Moses to give to the children of Israel. And what did Moses do? He read all of the law to Israel. Then what he did was he took the blood of certain animals, sprinkled it on the altar, sprinkled it on the book, and sprinkled it on the nation of Israel. That was the agreement, that this agreement was sealed, because all agreements, were sealed in blood. And when you make a decree, like when there's a testament or a will, a person cannot, the people that are benefiting from it cannot receive that benefit until the person that gave the will is dead. You see? And that's why Yahushua had to come to fulfill, the blood sacrifice for the second covenant. And the second covenant will be fulfilled in the kingdom of heaven when the law, statutes, and commandments will be put into what? Into our inward parts, the nation of Israel. So then the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service and a worldly sanctuary. And that's what the sanctuary was for. And that's why it pertained to the nation of Israel, because the priests, which were the Levites, they would bring in, the sacrifices for the nation of Israel. For there was a tabernacle made, the first wherein was the candlestick, and the table, and the shewbread, which is called the sanctuary. That's the first part of the temple, where all of the business of the of Israel was done by the Levites, the Levitical priests. And after the second veil, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all. So this was the second part of it, because in the holiest of all, which was the holiest of holy, you had what was known as the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant was a chest, for lack of better words, with two angels on top facing each other. I believe it was they were facing each other, if I'm not mistaken. And then there was a mercy seat sitting in the center of it, and that's where the presence of the Lord would appear to receive the atonement and the sacrifice for the nation of Israel for every year. All right. It says, which had the golden censer and the Ark of the Covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant. And over it the cherubims, which are the angels, of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly. Why? Because by this time, the Ark of the Covenant was gone. It says, now, when these things were thus ordained, the priest went always into the first tabernacle, accomplishing the service of the Most High. And then, and you brothers that have spiritual eyes to see, you know that after Yahushua was crucified and buried, there were two angels that appeared in his tomb. When Mary Magdalene came up to, actually the apostle Peter and John came to the sepulcher. I believe it was either with them or with Mary Magdalene, that when they looked into the sepulcher, you had two angels, one at the head and one at the feet. And that was a representation that now Yahushua represents that Ark of the Covenant, that mercy seat. It says, but into the second went the high priest alone once every year. And that's what the scriptures say, that Yahushua was made a priest after the order of Melchizedek. Because every year the high priest will go in alone into the holiest of holy, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the errors of the people. You see? And this was only given to the nation of Israel. The Holy Spirit, this signifying that the way into the holiest of all was not yet made manifest, whilst as the first tabernacle was yet standing. See? And we know that the tabernacle, we don't have that tabernacle anymore. See, the third temple right now is us, the nation of Israel, being built back up, the house of David, which was a figure for the time then present. See, so it was just a figure, because everything that was set up as far as the law is concerned, it was set up as a shadow of things to come. Because in the kingdom, we wouldn't have to do this. This was just a rehearsal to get to the kingdom. All right? It says, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices, which we just read the word sacrifice, which means to make holy, that could not make him that did the service perfect as pertaining to the conscience. Why? Because this was always in mind of us going off, even though we did the Day of Atonement. That's why in the kingdom, this stony heart is going to be turned into a fleshly heart, and the laws are going to be put into our inward parts. So that way there will be no, the Lord says he's going to come and wipe away iniquities from Israel, from Jacob. It says, which stood only in meats and drinks and divers washings and carnal ordinances imposed on them until the time of Reformation. So we got the Reformation when? when Yahushua came on the scene. That's why it says, matter of fact, let me get real quick. Let me get the book of Galatians real quick. To the time of Reformation, go straight to the point. Galatians 4:4. But when the fullness of the time was come, what is this? The time of Reformation. The Most High sent forth his son, Yahushua, made of a woman, made under the law, because he was made of, he came out of Mary, but it was Joseph's seed that impregnated Mary, all right, to bring forth Yahushua. And he was made under the law because why? He had to go be circumcised. It says to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. So this is the time of Reformation, because Yahushua came to be able to become that ultimate sacrifice, because the Lord was not accepting sacrifices anymore. When you read through the history of how the Lord felt about the sacrifices that Israel was offering to him, he was sick, fed up with them. It says, but this is while the old tabernacle was standing, the old temple, right? It was just a shadow of things to come until Yahushua came and became that ultimate sacrifice. Now that part of the law, the sacrifice, the sacrificial law, we no longer do. It says, but Yahushua being coming high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building. Right. Because that building was what? Temporary. And if you committed certain things against the law back then, you would become the ultimate sacrifice. So those animals would be sacrificed for our iniquities, for our transgressions. But if an individual went too far, what happened? They became the sacrifice. All right. It says, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered in once into the holy place, which is what? The holiest of holy, which is what? Up in the heavens by the Father. Now that's why he's sitting on the right hand of the Most High, having obtained eternal redemption for us. So we have eternal redemption. So there's no more need for the sacrificing of the blood of animals. For if the blood of bulls and of goats and of ashes of an heifer sprinkling the unclean sanctifieth to the purifying of the flesh of who? Of the nation of Israel, how much more shall the blood of Yahushua, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to the Most High, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living power? Because now the laws will be put into our inward parts. All right. It says, and for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament. Which, what was the New Testament? The laws being put into our inward parts. The Most High bringing back the nation of Israel, and no longer them being two kingdoms, but they being one, merged back into one kingdom. And for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, which was given to who? To the nation of Israel. They which are called might receive the promise of eternal life, because in this time only the elect are going to be called. But in the kingdom, all Israel shall be saved. All right, so now let's stop there, because we know that we no longer have that temple or that tabernacle, and that's how the sacrifices were made. They were made in the temple. All right, whether it was, in the sanctuary, or whether it was in the holiest of holies. All right, which happened once a year. All right. Now, let's go to Revelation 21:22, and this is dealing with the kingdom of heaven. This is dealing with, when you read from the first verse down, it's speaking about the kingdom of heaven and how the city is going to be built and so on and so forth. Which, when John saw it, he actually saw a city, but that city that he saw represented the nation of Israel, the elect, coming down from the chariots back upon the earth to be set back up to receive the promise that the Most High gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And when we jump down to the 22nd verse, it says, and I, meaning the Apostle John, saw no temple therein. Why? Because in the temple was where we would sacrifice, or the high priest would sacrifice, and the priests. So he said he saw no temple, because right now, let's go real quick to the book of 1 Corinthians, real quick, chapter 3. And verse 16, it says, know ye not that ye are the temple of the Most High, and that the Spirit of the Most High dwelleth in you? So pretty much we are the temple of the Most High. So our bodies is that temple. All right. So now let's go to 1 Peter 2:5. It says, "Ye also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to the Most High by Yahushua." So we are that temple now. All right. The nations have nothing to do with this. So the Apostle John said, I saw no temple therein, because he understood about the temple, because he was around during a time when the actual temple was there. And how Jake would go and do their sacrifices, go to the priest or, bring their offering, whatever it was. It says, "And I saw no temple therein, for the Lord power almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it." So there's going to be no need for any sacrifice, because there won't be any temple. And the nations will not be, there will be no sacrificing for the other nations. Because if those nations go off, guess what? They're going to be the sacrifice. They're going to get the brunt of it. They're going to be the ones that's going to be sacrificed, for lack of better words. Let's go to Revelation 2:25. "But that which you have already, hold fast till I come. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations." See, so we're going to have that power over the nations, and they're going to have to follow the laws. "And he shall rule them with a rod of iron." So beginning with Yahushua on down, we're going to rule these nations with a rod of iron. So if they get out of line, pop, you're going to knock them in the head. And if they get too funky, they'll get put to death. "As the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, even as I received of my Father." So if they're going to be broken to shivers, meaning what? They're going to be the ultimate sacrifice. So there ain't going to be no sacrificing in the kingdom of heaven, even as I received of my Father. And either if they go off, depending on what sin they break, they're going to get knocked in the head, or they're going to get put to death. Or, as it states in the book of Zechariah 14:16, as we read on down, "And it shall come to pass that every one that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem, shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles." So they're going to have to keep our feast. Now, when you go back into the law, dealing with the Feast of Tabernacles, the only ones that would keep the Feast of Tabernacles were all that were Israelite born. Go and read it. The nations never kept the Feast of Tabernacles. But in the kingdom, they're going to have to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. They're going to have to observe our laws, statutes, and commandments. And seeing that there's no temple, and there will be no temple in the kingdom, they will be the ultimate sacrifice. Because that was the purpose for the temple, to make holy. "And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts." So if they refuse to come up, this is another punishment. "Even upon them shall be no rain." And if you have no rain, that means your crops will not be blessed. So this is another form of punishment. So what does this entail, or what is it saying? That they will have to bear that sacrifice, because either they're going to get knocked in the head for breaking the law, be put to death for breaking the law, or they will not get blessings. You see? So there will be the sacrifice. So there will be no sacrificing in the kingdom of heaven, because first of all, we don't have to sacrifice for ourselves, because we're going to be perfect. The laws are going to be into our inward parts. The law and sacrifice never pertain to the nations. That's what the Lord said, "Gather my saints together unto me, those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice." The nations never made a covenant with the Lord by sacrifice. So there's not going to be any sacrifice in the kingdom. No sacrifice in the kingdom. It's going to be all done. The nations will become the sacrifice, whether they get knocked in the head, beat down, put to death, or blessings withheld from them, because they don't keep the law, statutes, and commandments. "And if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague." See, so this will be the plague. That will be the sacrifice, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. "This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles." See? So what do you think is going to happen if they break the laws? They're going to be the sacrifice. So there will be no sacrifice in the kingdom of heaven. And that's why the Most High and Yahweh Shai are going to be the temple. So there's not going to have to be, because there's no more, the priesthood was changed. So there's no more priest to officiate the business. There's no more high priest to go into the holiest of holies every year to do the Day of Atonement. We keep the Day of Atonement as a measure of goodwill, of faith to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. But technically, the Lord already took care of that tab for us. But we do it because we're rehearsing the righteous acts and showing our faith to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. So there will be no sacrifices. So you brothers that have been teaching that there's going to be sacrifices in the kingdom, you got to stop it. There's not going to be any sacrifices in the kingdom. The nations that break the law, they will become the sacrifice. Whether they be beat over the head, whether they be put to death, or whether blessings will be withheld from them. So with that, I pray that you brothers have been edified. Till the next time I say, Shalom. Statutes and commandments. And if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague. See, so this will be the plague. That will be the sacrifice, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. See?